Work, Madras Christian College, and Center for International Social Work, I welcome you all to the second day international webinar on growing global interdependence in international social work. This webinar is an initiative of the International Social Work Elective students. A short recap of Day 1 program. Yesterday, the speaker has given us an overview of a concept of international social work and highlights on interdependence in social work. As we move on to the session, I would like to give few instructions to the participant. For those in Zoom, post your questions in the Q&A box, and in YouTube, you may post your questions in chat box. Since we have intense session today, I request all the speakers to answer the questions directly in the chat box. The answer given by the speakers will be shared in the YouTube at the end of every session. A feedback link will be shared at the end of both Zoom and YouTube. An e-certificate will be provided only the participant who attended both the days of the program. Now, I would like to call Ms. Renu to introduce our first speaker of the day. Over to you, Renu.
Thank you, Roja. The first speaker for today is Dr. Vimla Nadkarni. Dr. Vimla V. Nadkarni is immediate past president of the International Association of Schools of Social Work, IASSW. She was also the first Indian to serve as the president of IASSW. She is retired as a senior professor from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, India, after working extensively in the field of social work for 42 years. She is an expert in the field of social work education and practice, public health and HIV/AIDS, and international social work. She is a founder member of the International Social Work Network in Health Inequalities. Her international awards include the Fulbright and Kellogg Fellowships. She was the second annual Hockenstand International Lecturer nominated by the Council of Social Work Education USA in the year 2008. Ma'am is no stranger to our department. She has been a part of one of our conferences titled Globalizations. Despite the very short notice, ma'am has agreed to be here with us today. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting your invitation, ma'am. We are so grateful to have you.
Madam.
Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Roja. And I'm so happy to see
Vimla ma'am, we are not able to hear you. Your audio is not. Yeah, she's connecting it. Ma'am, you need to unmute yourself, Vimla ma'am. You have to unmute. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll repeat myself. I want to thank you for inviting me to this wonderful seminar, and nice to see you, Miriam and Philomena, Prince, and of course my great friend Anna Maria. A big hug to you, Anna. I'm seeing you after a long time. Well, I would like to share my PowerPoint, make my presentation based on my PowerPoint. I would also request you, Roja or Renu, to tell me if I'm, sort of going over my time. I'm supposed to take 15 minutes. Now let me see. I have to share the screen. I'm trying to open my... Sorry, it's taking a little time to open. Can you see it? Hello?
Yes,
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 ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm starting my presentation with a small description of the changing global scenario, whereby countries across the globe are facing similar and yet different problems, different in scale. The social work response is thus affected by the political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental changes. Take COVID-19, for example, an unexpected disaster. What a major difference it is making in all our lives. Social work is founded on relationships with people through face to face contact and reaching out to people in their homes and communities. We are now being forced to reimagine our response and use technological relationships rather than human ones. We have to learn new skills in these times. So, are we in a time warp? Wasn't poverty in the streets and homelessness a thing of the past? Something that supposedly belonged to the early history of social services, even in countries like America? Not anymore. The ballooning global financial crisis, disasters, pandemics all over the world has been sending unprecedented numbers of people out of their homes onto the streets into a life of penury and hardship, even as the gap between the haves and have nots gets bigger by the year. According to the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, 567,715 people were experiencing homelessness in the US on a single night in 2019. About 63% of those people were in emergency shelters and transitional housing programs. 37% were in unsheltered locations. The numbers of people experiencing homelessness are most likely much higher than reported. And what is aggravating the problem is the compromise of health of these people. Reasons for increasing inequalities are related to the dynamics within the world economy. While some countries may see increased GDPs, this is not getting reflected in increase in employment nor individual incomes. As the economist Thomas Piketty observes in his major volume titled Capital in the 21st Century, which he wrote, which was published in 2014, that we are becoming less equal, less mobile, and less democratic with the increase in capital accumulation in a few hands. Piketty's analysis shows that while there are increasing inequalities within countries, the inequalities between countries are much larger. Can we or should we wait for an estimated 800 years for the bottom billion to achieve 10% of global income under the current rate of change? Paradoxically, the crisis has led to a diminish rather than growing social sector spending by the state. Predictably, many social systems and institutions are under threat. These include the very systems that supported the participation of marginalized communities in social life. The greater irony is the cutback of funding for social work, both for practice and education, just when more social workers are required to deal with not just the economic meltdown, but also with myriads of looming crises, natural and man-made, such as conflicts and wars, sparking mass exodus of migrants and refugees. Do we need international social workers to respond to global crisis? I recall in UK, the association in UK was sort of lobbying with the government, which had reduced the welfare expenditure, and they had stopped employing professional social workers, and in fact they were creating training programs, certificate programs for social workers so that they would have to pay lower salaries. The greater irony is the cutback of funding for social work, both practice and education. How then do we define international social work? According to Lynn Healy, global social work has four dimensions: internationally related domestic practice and advocacy, through addressing problems that cross national boundaries. For example, trafficking, drug sales. I think you are all aware that between India and Nepal, there's a lot of trafficking happening between India, Bangladesh, and the neighboring countries, working with international populations. The second dimension is professional exchange, that is using knowledge gained from other countries to improve practice and policy in home country. I think in India we have depended on a lot of knowledge of the publication, the knowledge from the USA, UK, and the developed countries. Today we are in a position to provide our own experience and our own writings to the North. So the South can, I think, educate the North too. International practice, social workers contribute to international development by working in international development agencies. For example, Grameen Bank, you all may have heard of that, started by Yunus in Bangladesh. And international policy development and advocacy, social work as a worldwide movement influencing policy at the international level, as in educational efforts with UN policy deliberations on violence against women. We have large movements of human beings moving across borders, created both by economic development and natural disasters. Imagine 3% of our world population are migrants who have moved for various reasons: economic, movement of labor, political asylum, displacement due to disasters, expansionism, new trade routes, seeking new settlements, and trafficking of girls, boys, and women for sexual and other forms of bondage and exploitation. The social work profession thus has to integrate local concerns with global awareness and meet the needs that emerge in that context. Gray and Folk use the term glocal. Ive talks about local global discourse to describe the potential focus of social work as a profession. I would therefore like to submit that only by addressing structural problems at their root can social work education hope to lead social change and transformation in a more equitable, compassionate, and more inclusive manner. This would entail engaging with the systems that oppress people and cause social injustice and inequalities, with systems, institutions, and practices that discriminate and violate human rights, partnering with the affected people and with those who can make a difference through imaginative and daring strategies of innovation and involvement. In this context, Roni Strier suggests a more inclusive social work practice, which focuses on greater involvement, participation, engagement, and conscientization of socially excluded populations. In this context, we have to understand and adopt Paulo Freire's paradigm of praxis. Speaking at the Social Workers World Conference in Stockholm, Sweden in 1988, Freire argued that the role of the progressive social worker is not only to stimulate and develop a permanent critical curiosity towards the world in themselves, but also to do so in those with whom they work. He advocated for informed action and a consciousness that would lead to reality transformation. Thus, we need both self development and social transformation to go hand in hand in the struggle for social justice. So, in order to develop an international social work uh, curriculum or course, we need to reorient the curriculum for our students. So enhance understanding of macro level issues. The curriculum in social work education should address these gaps of training social work students to become more insightful in their analysis of global crises, wars and conflicts as created by the global war on terror, and be critical of government securitization and surveillance policies. They should be taught to struggle against categorization of people, which results in discriminatory actions and culturization of people's problems depending on their color of skin, ethnicity, racial background, religious background, sexuality, and other attributes. Students have to be oriented to the different theoretical perspectives. In Australia and some parts of Europe, and now in India, critical social work is being taught and is informed by and linked to a range of perspectives like radical, feminist, anti discriminatory, and anti oppressive practice and structural social work. Students are inspired by the work they see in the field. Fieldwork initiated by their faculty, their field instructors, as well as the vision and mission of the university and college. Examples are of interns participating in international organizations like the UN. The International Association of Schools of Social Work, for example, supports students to do their internship in the UN. So we have two students from the University of Connecticut in the US working, supervised by the faculty there and working with the UN in New York. We also need to strengthen students in networking, advocacy, and technological skills, joining campaigns through change.org. Me Too, you all have heard of the campaign Me Too, which is to protect women against violence. Also, there have been recent movements against racism in the US.
Ma'am,
We also,
we have
yes,
exceeded the time, ma'am. Can you please
yeah,
conclude?
yeah, yeah. I will conclude.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I think you all have heard of the term green social work, which was developed by Lina Dominelli, who is a very well-known social work educator in the UK, and she's also brought out a book on green social work. So when we are looking at our models, I think these are some of our alumni who have become change agents not only at the local, national, regional level, but also international. I think you all are familiar with them. And this is just an example from Australia of how the immigrants that, were being uh, ousted from Australia. You all may have heard of stories where, when they were crossing the seas, they were stopped. And some of them were even detained in the prison. So the Australian Council of Heads of Schools of Social Work instituted an inquiry, and students were also placed with these groups, immigrant groups. And the challenge is to document these practices and develop indigenous literature on these various interventions. Um, Roja, can I just take 2-3 minutes, or shall I conclude?
Yes, ma'am, you can take.
Okay. I just want to conclude with the dilemmas and so we have both the dilemmas of working with policies of austerity that are restricting the role of social work, working with political systems that are increasingly controlling social institutions. For example, in India, we have the freedom of NGOs and CSOs being strangled, a lot of problems being created for receiving foreign funds, uh, and many restrictive rules now in the laws. Being forced to assess and make judgment based on deserving poor. Fear of loss of jobs if work with undocumented migrants and communities are not legally recognized for welfare subsidies. So what are therefore the opportunities that we have? Evidence building through research to advocate policy and interventions for improving the life of the poor. We have those skills and we can use our research skills. Adopt skills and values of green social work practice, skills to work on all aspects of disaster relief and management, learn skills to struggle against categorization of people, which I have mentioned before. I would like to end with our global statement, which was developed over a period of 3 years by the three international social work organizations, ISW, IFSW, and ICSW. I quote, "We commit ourselves to supporting, influencing, and enabling structures and systems that positively address the root causes of oppression and inequality. We commit ourselves wholeheartedly and urgently to work together with people who use services and with others who share our objectives and aspirations to create a more socially just and fair world that we will be proud to leave to future generations. We will prioritize our endeavors to these ends." And a poem for our young students. You stand before hundreds, yet your words stir every single one. The world waits for your passion, courage, and wisdom, as there are many who want to be free. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting the international perspective of social work through various
Tasman?
Yes, sir. I think Roja's back.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Roja.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening the international perspective of social work through various examples. It was interesting. The second speaker for the day is Dr. Robin Edward Deering, professor of the University, Houston, Texas. He is the director at the Center for Mental Health Research and Innovation in Treatment Engagement and Service. This center is focused is more improving the lives of individuals, managing the mental health issues through research, education, and clinical intervention. Dr. Gearing's research focuses on improving the mental health outcome of adolescents and young adults with serious mental illness and their family. Dr. Gearing has conducted a series of national and international studies examining the multidimensional components of treatment, engagement, resulting in the development of culturally informed treatment, adherence strategies, and intervention for underserved population, among others. We are glad to have you with us today, sir. Over to you, sir, for the session on mental health and global interdependence.
Thank you very much. It is lovely to see everyone today, and I appreciate the honor for having me come and talk a little bit today. Can everyone hear me well, I hope?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Boy, I love technology when it works. It is a great thing. All right, so I'm going to, now here's where I'm trying to figure out, how do I share my PowerPoint? Can I do that?
Yes, sir.
I can.
Share screen. Click share screen and
Haha,
yeah.
how's that? Are we good now?
Yes.
I'm going to go back to my original statement then. I love it when technology works. There we go. Thank you for having me, and thank you for putting on such an important conference and presentations in this area that I think is increasingly needed as our world today continues to shrink. So today I want to spend just a few minutes talking about mental health and global interdependence, and a little bit of how we need to be increasingly more aware of one another and to work with one another to improve and address an issue that affects all of us in different ways. I like children and I like babies, so hopefully you can see this. So I often show this slide and say, can you tell me where this picture was taken? Which country, which community, which area? And the reality is this picture could be anywhere. Babies in hospital nurseries look adorable wherever they are in this world. And in this group, there are going to be children who grow up to manage mental health concerns and issues as there would be in any parts of the world. And there are hopefully children in this group who will grow up to work with and focus and improve the lives that they have with mental illness and the lives that others might have with mental illness. It is no longer an issue that is in just one part of our world. It's an issue certainly in all parts. If we want to look at some of the raw data on mental health concerns and issues, there is the prevalence rates, although vary from country to country. Research has kind of weighed in that about 1 in 5 children at some point in their 0 to 12 will have some sort of mental health concerns, but 1 in 3 adolescents, and about almost half of adults. It doesn't mean they will for life. Often these are transient issues. Sometimes they're more of a serious mental health issue. When we look at global prevalence rates, which are spotty at times, but we're increasingly seeing more of this, the general thought is 1 in 6 people will have a mental disorder of some description currently. That's 1 in 6. That's when we walk down the street, when we go to the grocery store. I know with social distancing, we don't see people as much, so it's nice to see so many people here, but the reality is in every walk of life, we are experiencing this. And if we leave mental health untreated, or we don't come together to work from different parts of the world and start increasingly to depend on the needs of one another, we're going to continue to see education be affected, by the economy be affected, as well as a number of other issues. So mental health ranks as the first among all disabilities that we face. And when we look at different disorders, it is certainly more than cardiovascular or cancer. It is just the most profound ones that we now have, but for so long we've ignored it. In developing low and middle income countries, we're seeing 80% of lived disability as a direct result of things like depression. In the US, it's estimated that $1 trillion is being related to the taken from the global economy just due to depression and anxiety. And those aren't the most costly of conditions. We know that schizophrenia costs more money than any other condition, and schizophrenia costs more money than all cancers combined when we look at the diagnosis, management, and treatment of it. And we know that if we spend money on treatment, and if we focus on the research and providing care to individuals with mental health, it has an impact not only where we are in the US, but a greater impact in other countries across the world. The GDP was hard to find some information on. India was around 1.2% for healthcare. In the US, it's about 18%. And much of that is on caring for mental health issues. I was trying to find some information on mental health issues in India. And so bear with me if my research was a little limited. But again, around 6.5% have some sort of, and this is more serious mental illness than across the board. We know that if we develop treatments together, and I'm going to talk about treatments in general, then why importantly to develop them with each other, is that treatments work. We've actually developed medication treatment and psychosocial treatments that are effective across a number of these conditions. We no longer think of managing mental health issues. We think of recovery from mental health issues. And it has a profound effect for individuals. It reduces their symptoms. It improves their prognostic course. It reduces hospitalization or dependence on more intrusive treatments. It improves their ability to manage and recover from these conditions. It decreases disability. And it strengthens their overall function of any of us if we treat a condition, both individually with their social parameters within their families, the academic, and their ability to work within large size. And it promotes optimal trajectory. So we know that mental health issues are prevalent everywhere. We know that they have perhaps the most significant impact of any large area of conditions for humans. And we know that we have treatments that will dramatically impact the majority of them. This is where we bring in some of the culture issues, that if we look at taking treatments or developing treatments, they've traditionally been developed in developed countries and or in LMAC countries where they are more developed in cities and urban areas and often in affluent areas. So developing them interventions that will be applied and adapted across the board is only beginning to be rolled out in the last maybe 20 years and still isn't effective. Most rural areas, even in the US, receive far less levels of treatment and care. And that assumes that people who live in different geographical areas within a country or in rural areas are the same culturally as those that live in cities. And we just know that there is huge cultural differences, and taking an intervention from one area to another is just not being as effective. So we need to understand increasingly the cultural influences and different aspects, how it influences mental health, how it influences communication style, symptoms, coping strategies, community supports, and stigma and willingness to seek treatment. I have the opportunities of doing research in many countries. And when we look at even why certain illnesses are considered mental health and what originates it, often in the US, we'll look at it as psychological terms. Someone has a depression or a schizophrenia. In work in China and in South and Central America, it's often described as physical, where it is a physical condition. My blood is heavy, my lungs are thick, kind of thing. They're more tired. And in countries certain countries in the Middle East, where it is often described as more religious based, that I have been cursed. I have not followed God's way or close enough. Now, interesting, although cultures all see this origins or the epidemiology of these conditions as somewhat different, there's all interrelation. They all look at psychological elements, they all look at physical elements, they all look at cultural elements, but how they put treatments into place and how they develop treatments has a distinct impact. So often either the development, translation, and adaptation of interventions just don't work when developed from one country to another. And the thought for a long time has not been interdependence and working together, but the simple idea that I would take a good idea from one place or someone and bring it to another. And that's still a siloed treatment of mental health conditions. Increasingly, if we can take the wisdom and practice experience and develop research in areas that need the work done, we're finding that not only does this improve the treatment and effectiveness of that treatment for mental health conditions in that community, in that region, but we can learn very unique insights from each one that we can pull into other cultures. So increasingly developing our interdependence globally on the research and understanding of treatment improves our ability to practice. So international interventions and adaptations require more expertise, and that expertise needs to incorporate and depend upon expertise in each area. There is so much interconnection to understanding these conditions and the treatment of these conditions that the interdependence between knowledge transfer, and knowledge development and implementation of science requires that to be shared both within locally and across the world. So to facilitate interventions, we need to bring the expertise and health models of local and cultural contexts is now recognized as essential for both the development and adaptation of any evidence-based intervention. And this includes understanding barriers, to obstacles of interventions, both in the local cultural system, the local meaning, and the systems of delivery, as well as what promoting strategies would work well within the local context, and how can those techniques work culturally and be applied perhaps and borrowed from to and from other areas, and increasingly to find identified pathways, both formal and informal, to treatment. There is many places where science is increasingly being seen as a negative. And that's a growing concern that we're having across health, and certainly in mental health. And how do we work with treatment providers that are both formal and informal, instead of assuming that there is one type of science, that we can appreciate that there's different types of science that can work and form one another in maybe in slightly different ways. So the burden of mental health across cultures has increased. It has led to more international development, adaptation and translation of practices within different communities and populations. International mental health interventions and treatment required certainly a deep knowledge and understanding of local context, but also expertise from and within each context. And future research into treatment intervention and cultural adaptation is needed, as cultures no longer are geographically located, but we take cultures with us. In Houston, in the US, where I currently am, there is a thriving Indian community. There is the thriving Indian community probably in every country of the world at this point, just like there's thriving other communities, and no longer are we geographically bound. And in understanding that interdependence is not just in the knowledge and expertise, but really where the people we need to serve is now. Improving global mental health requires research and practice from all peoples in the world. It is needed, it is required, it cannot be sustained without having the input and interdependence of all of us. And it requires us to take into consideration disparities of mental health treatment and care that exist across cultures. Not interventions will work in every area or need to be adapted and developed in different ways. That doesn't mean the core mechanisms cannot. And it requires all of us. So I will end with the thought that we all need to contribute in our own ways for those that work in the field of mental health and healthcare. I just love this picture. So this is just, I just like ending with it. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you've given me to speak on some of these issues.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for throwing a light on global perspective of mental health and also on evidence-based mental health intervention. Thank you, sir. The next section will be taken by Mrs. Philomena Harrison. Mrs. Philomena Harrison is the Senior Lecturer in the Social Work Department of Liverpool Hope University, England. Before this, she was a Director of Mental Health for the Faculty of Health and Social Care at the University of Salford. Trained a psychiatric social worker, her social work practice has been with women, children, and families. She trained as a social worker for 12 years at the Liverpool John Moores University. Her research has included work on the role of family recovery from mental distress in Chennai, India. She has presented work on issue of race and mental health, cultural competency, and race and identity at national and international conferences. Her commitment is to achieve an inclusive practice in all areas of social life and working towards social justice for all. Ma'am will be talking about cross-cultural competency. I request you, ma'am, take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've remembered to unmute myself, but I'm very grateful for this opportunity to join you at this conference. I'm going to be just speaking. I don't have a PowerPoint to share. I suppose I wanted to begin by just reminding us, as other speakers have done, really, that we are functioning at the moment in the crises of COVID-19, which has impacted on a global scale. And also for me, certainly, and in the UK, the impact of the death of George Floyd and the development of the Black Lives Movement, which has again had a global impact. So that's the context in which I've been reflecting and thinking about cross-cultural competencies. I am a lecturer in social work, and I've spent most of my days training and working with students who wish to become social workers. I have spent a short period of time in Chennai and in Bangalore in terms of kind of connecting with colleagues, working really in similar areas and committed to similar areas of social justice. I'm grateful for the previous two speakers to have contextualized very well some of my reflections, which I will present to you shortly. I have to say, also influenced by having been born in India and grown up until the age of 15 and in the wonderful city of Calcutta. That's not a challenge to Chennai, but there you go. Okay, so as working as an academic then in education of social workers, I'm tasked with developing and educating social work professionals with a very specific set of values, skills and knowledge. And these are outlined by the regulatory bodies in social work. And we as lecturers are tasked then to work with those and develop those values and knowledge and skills with our students. As I don't need to say to everybody here really, but I will do, is that social work is work with vulnerable groups of people in our society impacted on by poverty, homelessness, racism, and other social divisions which bring discrimination and oppression for those individuals and communities. So my work then is about looking at developing these skills which enable social justice for those communities. So one specific area of competence and capability that is required is that of cultural competence. And we support our students to enabling them to develop these skills through and via what I refer to as anti-oppressive practice. And that includes considering and reflecting on the principles such as power, social difference, understanding social systems and their impact on the individual, and the relevance of historical and geographical specificity in terms of those individual experiences. And we asked and try and develop students to bring those skills together by being able to use really a way of reflective and reflexive practice. So Britain, England in particular, is described as a multicultural society. This multicultural community is made up of people from places across the globe. And I want to note that many of those have colonial histories which link directly to Britain and its days of empire. And this is reflected very much in the diasporic communities who naturally at times have need for and use health and social care services. Though Britain has this long history of diverse communities, it is only in recent years that we've been making the efforts here to address service delivery to the whole range of communities in terms of their health and social care needs. And there have been points at which these particular changes in service delivery and of course training at the same time have emerged. Now, the form of this migration has been the case really for some time, and in Britain mainly beginning in the 50s, but of course before the 50s. And it was really only in the 80s that legislation and policies were developed to respond to such minority communities. We began to look at training on anti-racist practice, and both training being developed and academics writing about anti-racist practice. And we know that in that process and that slow move to making these changes, that I personally would say that racism had become endemic in a whole range of social care systems and institutions, including the police and the National Health Service. So I refer quickly to two major reports, which was the Macpherson report on the death of the tragic death of Stephen Lawrence, and which pointed to racist practices in the police force and the criminal justice system. And then the other was the report on a young man called David Rocky Bennett, who died in a medium secure psychiatric unit. And the report pointed to the way that racism really was part of his contributing to his death. Okay. So there was changes in the race and in the legislation, and the act obliged public organizations to respond to a culturally plural society. And specific legislation influencing policy making came into being, which required many of the organizations that dealt with Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities to develop this notion about looking at cultural competence. So we saw a shift here in policymakers trying to bring about change. And one of the changes came really with a view to talking and dialogue around this notion of culture and cultural competence. So what we found at this point in time, in my view, that the notions of race then merged with the concepts of ethnicity and culture, where professionals began to be required to become culturally competent in their practice. And one of the piece of work which was done by Papadopoulos et al. In 2004 produced a training tool for assessing cultural competence. And this was to be used in with health and social care professionals. So the model provided a framework or a map for professionals to measure and engage in training to develop appropriate cultural competent ways of working using an assessment tool developed by the researchers. So participants who were training in this way of working could measure and engage in training in 4 areas of of developing cultural competence. So they identified cultural awareness, and this begins with an examination of one's own values and beliefs, appreciating the construction of cultural identity and how that influences a person's worldview. Secondly, there was the area of cultural knowledge that training was enabling people to develop. And the process for this was through meaningful contact with people from different ethnicities to learn about and understand and gain knowledge around their, specifically in this case, around health behaviors. So making links between personal position and structural inequalities. Cultural sensitivity then explored how workers view people in their care, how they develop trust and empathy and work in partnership with the users of services. And through these 3 areas of cultural awareness, cultural knowledge, and cultural sensitivity, one could look to enabling people through training to develop what was known as cultural competence, which we could see as a synthesis of those other 3 areas. So we have this conceptual map which was developed for each stage to enable a framework for the detail needing to be addressed at each stage. They would then be able to, people who do use the training will be able to self-assess and pre and post-training and measure their development with the goal, as one would expect, being cultural competence. So where cultural competence then can be defined as a skill to appreciate and work in new cultural context. The ability then to understand, this is for workers, to understand others' world and function effectively in new and different cultural contexts. So the focus had shifted to addressing aspects of culture as contributing to discrimination in the delivery of services. It could be argued here that this shift seemed a more concrete way for practitioners to address racism. It assumed then that racist practices were based on misunderstandings of the service user's culture and cultural practices by the professional, rather than, and this I think is one of my main criticisms of just looking at culture. So service users culture and cultural practices by the professional, rather than the deep-rooted prejudicial practices based on structural and historical racism. Services were thought to have been designed to respond to assumptions then of a monocultural society, where the design of services, in essence, was based on racist and Eurocentric and Western hegemony. And from my point of view, that is what we needed to challenge and continue to challenge. Okay, so a number of contradictions then, as I'm beginning to suggest, arose from trying to work in what we call working with people with reference to naming it as cross-cultural competencies. We and social work want social workers to be able to listen and learn from the service users and not to be required to hold specialized knowledge about a whole range of cultures. And I say that because unfortunately, practitioners began to think that they had to know everything there was to know about different cultures, whereas it negated then the process which said we have to develop this cultural knowledge and sensitivity and awareness. And I think one of my criticisms of it was really, I think I phrased it at one point, that it was not just about Diwali and samosas. It was about being able to address those fundamental and inherent racism within health and social care systems. And one of the things that happened really is that people started to focus on culture and focus on religious activities and religious festivals, yet negating those massive injustices within the system, which for me were around racism. So the process was in danger then of ignoring intersectionality and interrelationships between race, ethnicity, culture, and other identities. Yeah. For example, people's culture is a dynamic process and it's not fixed. And what I try to have a conversation with my students is about that not everybody from within that culture will agree with that cultural system, those cultural behaviors, yeah. Because practitioners then began to hold this view that this is the culture, and I'll make an assumption that this individual appears to belong to that culture, so this is the way I will respond to them. And one of the pointers I'd like to mention really was what was happening was, for example, practitioners were assuming that Asian families, and again, I'm lumping a whole group of communities and ethnicities together there. I apologize for that. But Asian families look after their own, yeah? And so what was happening then, the practitioners acknowledging and just making assumptions about that particular aspect of that particular culture, left individuals within those communities without services, with the assumption in the culture, British culture here, that people would be looking after their own. And as I was saying before, cultures are not developed in vacuums. In Britain, minority ethnic groups have developed in complex ways, taking into account historical impacts of colonialism and neo-colonialism. And I feel that, you know, what was happening was that some practitioners were frustrated because they felt they were having to respond to a range of the complexities of different cultures, whereas the task was about developing yourself really to be able to acknowledge difference and work and deal with difference. So in Britain then, the fear that the notion of concept of cultural competence shifted the gaze away from discrimination on the ground of race. As practitioners and social work and social care educationalists were too afraid to face and deal with the experiences of service users who felt exclusion and discrimination on the grounds of difference based on racism. Yeah. And those could be intersected with class or caste and other aspects of difference, yeah, about being a woman, about being disabled. In my view, my observations were that it was easier, in a sense, to confront cultural differences than deep-rooted personal and institutional and structural racism. However, I do feel that the work on addressing the notion of cultural competence in health and social care has enabled some practitioners to explore their own and others' cultures, enabling them to produce more fair practices. But cultural competence, I repeat myself, cannot be achieved without an acknowledgement of the complexities of development of culture for people in the diaspora, with whom my students will be working. More importantly, the impact of racism on practitioners and service users who are defined as coming from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities who work in and use health and social care services. Culture and identity are crucially important in the development of the individual and the groups and communities to which a person belongs, but they are both dynamic concepts subject to influence and change. In my position in terms of addressing cultural competence, I always try to place the need for thinking and working and developing skills in that context. I always want and address the notion of anti-oppressive practice with students. And anti-oppressive practice and the principles that I address are those around looking at power in those contexts of practice, social difference in that context of practice, and asking questions about the range of social differences. And in there, one could ask the questions about culture and ethnicity. I want my students to be able to, in working in an anti-oppressive way, address social systems and the structural issues within social systems which impact on individuals and communities. I want my students, in working in an anti-oppressive way, to adjust the historical and geographical specificity in terms of that one service user. So if you're working with a refugee and asylum seeker from Syria, you cannot understand that culture without understanding the history behind those particular positions of those individuals and the political dimensions which produce people's both alienation and dispersal from their places of origin. I want students to then be able to also develop a reflexive approach to their practice. Yeah. So this questioning and the principles then of anti-oppressive practice include the complex analysis of self and other, the complex analysis of self and other in relation to ethnicity, in relation to culture. It deals with the process and goals such as there might be, producing then from the practitioner's point of view and the services point of view, that mutual engagement in that reflexive moment of practice, allowing for analysis then of institutional and organizational values in the current and historical context. Anti-oppressive practice produces inclusive practice, not an argument for separate services or privileged services. Thank you.
Thank you, Philomena ma'am. for giving us a thorough understanding on how different cultures impact social work practice and the importance of cross-cultural competency. I thank Vimla ma'am, Robin sir, and Philomena ma'am for giving us detailed insights into topics important to us as future social work practitioners. I now invite Roja to take over for the next session, a panel discussion by exchange students. Thank you.
For general instruction, participants, please put your questions in chat box. The next session is most awaited session of the day, a panel discussion on reflection of exchange students. The panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Miriam Samwell. Dr. Miriam Samwell is head of the social work department since 1993. She is an expert in the area of curriculum development for social work and conducted various gender training programs and mental health programs for different groups. Ma'am has been a pillar of strength and encouragement to the department and the students since its inception. I request you to take over the panel discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Roja, for the introduction and the welcome. I'm happy to be moderating this panel discussion with young social workers who have been on international exchange programs to share their international experiences and how that has contributed to their cross-cultural competencies, contributed to the understanding of social work in terms of justice and equity for all. And for our panel, we have five students who've been on different exchanges. The first person on the exchange with us, who was with us at Madras Christian College, is Ms. Lucy Ann Wood, who is from the University of South Australia in Adelaide. She came to Madras Christian College, the Department of Social Work, in 2018 as a Master's Social Work Exchange student. And she completed her master's program from the University of South Australia in 2019. And she has a wide range of experience in terms of her professional development, presently working with the child and adolescent mental health services from January 2019, where she's involved in consultation in response to clients' needs, listening with stakeholders, identifying risks, and developing therapy skills for the clients. She also has her experience in a school setting in Adelaide with out of school hours for children, and has other experiences both in Adelaide and during her placement in India. We are so happy that she accepted our invitation to share her experiences, and we look forward to listening to her experiences right now.
Hi everyone, my name's Lucy. I live in Adelaide, South Australia. I came to India back in 2018 as part of the MCC UniSA Social Work Exchange. So prior to that, I was studying a Bachelor of International Development with specialisations in criminology. So I was in India for about 4 months, living in Martin Hall, and I completed my placement at the community college, the MCC Community College, and the school on campus. And part of that role was just sort of advocating for the role of a social worker and how that could benefit the students attending both institutions. So since coming back from India, I've been fortunate enough to gain employment with the government. So I'm a social worker with an organisation called Child and Adolescent Mental Health. Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services are a tertiary mental health service. So they're set up for the 0 to 16 age gap. And we work with families with children who are presenting with quite acute mental health needs. So on the pointy end of mental health, the kids who are presenting with deliberate self-harm or suicidality. And in that role, I work with families and children directly to sort of build up regulation and coping skills and stuff like that. So when I first got the job, I was in the triage centre, and part of that was just listening to referrals, so talking to doctors, talking to schools, talking to parents about young people they were concerned about, and trying to link them up with the best service, whether that be us or someone else in the community. since August, I've been in another role. So I'm a therapist and I'm working directly with children who were affected by the Adelaide Hills bushfires that were current during the end of 2019, and they swept through most of the Hills area. So we've got a lot of kids who are coming forward with anxiety type symptoms, and that's like difficulties sort of separating from their mum and dad, some co-sleeping and things like that, that we're working with them around, as well as some group projects we're doing with schools. So, sorry, if I go to the next question. So I guess my Indian experience has sort of enriched me both personally and professionally. Personally, I think India gave me an experience like no other. I think those of you who live in India are quite lucky to live in such a sort of colourful and diverse country. And I think that's one of the things that I noticed very quickly was that there isn't, it's not, you know, same, and it's not as grey as Australia can be. There's pops of colour everywhere, and there's always some fun to be had. I think also, you know, like I had some really good experiences travelling around and getting to know the people and the culture and learn about things like your caste systems and how they continue to sort of impact people in India today. I guess professionally it's taught me a lot about sort of culturally diverse and linguistic practice and how I can, I guess, sort of be the best social worker I can when I'm working with people from diverse backgrounds and cultures. So I know in my current role, we prioritise people from different countries, so people from different backgrounds, and I know that my time in India has sort of, I guess, boosted my skill level in terms of working with cultures like that. I've learnt that I can be vulnerable in a position where I feel like I don't know much about someone's culture, and I can be vulnerable to learn from them about who they are and what makes them who they are. I feel like India, it gave me also a strong sense of independence, or at least sort of developed the strong sense of independence I had previously. It taught me that I could be alone and I could work comfortably by myself, particularly when working at my placements and trying to advocate for the role of a social worker. I'm very thankful for my time in India. I think I've been itching to get back, but obviously COVID's kind of put a dampener on that. And hopefully one day soon I can come back and hopefully work there and, you know, learn more from the people and the cultures and everything else. But yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and hopefully a few of you recognise my face and you're doing well. And yeah, thank you. See you later. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that presentation from Lucy. She had to pre-record her presentation and send it to us. But I think it was quite an eye-opener for us as we listened to her. Some of the things that came out was in terms of what Philomena herself has been talking about in terms of diversity and respecting another culture and learning from another culture in terms of the differences that are here, and how this has, she used the word, boosted my skill level in working with diverse communities back in Adelaide itself. So I think that's a great learning that Lucy has had while on exchange in India, and this what she's been able to take back to her own community after her experience here. We do remember you, Lucy, if you're listening to this or if you're looking at the recorded session later, we do remember you, and we do hope and pray that you're safe and doing well too. Thank you so much for your time with us. The next person on our panel, we have with us a student exchange who came from the University of South Australia, the United States of America, with whom we have a memorandum of understanding. As you know, in the introduction, when Roja said, she said that we have the Center for International Social Work at the Department of Social Work in Madras Christian College. This Center for International Social Work was established in 2007 with the idea of having collaborations and multilateral relationships with different organizations, both formal and informal. For instance, we had Philomena with us, and she's from one of our partner institutions. We had Robin with us, and he has been bringing groups of students to Madras System College in Chennai, and we've had some interactive sessions with their groups of students and faculty themselves. And therefore, this has really helped us to take international social work to a different level altogether. So Ms. Marina Sterngold has completed a master's in social work from the University of South Australia. And she was with us on exchange in June 2018 for 2 months. And during her time here, she worked at ActionAid India, and she also worked at our field action program. We have a field action program where we worked with marginalized communities, tribal communities in settlements very close to where we are. And the students and faculty members of the department are actively involved in advocacy and working for the rights of these groups of people. And Marina Sterngold had helped us at that point of time in working with them and doing some documentation and need assessments of these tribal communities or hamlets very close to us in Tambra. She presently works in Chicago, and we are very, very happy that she agreed to record her session and send it to us. And we really look forward to listening to her presentation right now. Over to the presentation of Ms. Marina Sterngold.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marina, and I am recording this video in Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. I had the privilege of being at MCC for a 3-month exchange program with the University of Michigan School of Social Work, which is where I also earned my MSW. I was at MCC in 2018 from about beginning of June till the end of August. And while I was there, I was very lucky actually to have 2 different field placements. So I was at ActionAid India for 2 days a week, and then I was working in the field action program through MCC the other 2 days a week. And then my 5th day on Friday was my rest day, really an opportunity to have supervision with Solomon Sir and to reflect on my week and my time in India and think about, for me, especially during that time, I was thinking about what my career path would look like after my global field placement and upon graduating at the end of 2018. So I am currently working in Chicago at a nonprofit called JCFS Chicago. I'm doing primarily program evaluation, which is actually what I studied while I was earning my MSW. So it is a very good fit. And I often reflect on my experience in India, even though I was not really doing so much program evaluation. I think so much of my lessons learned during my global field placement was around interpersonal growth. And so it wasn't for me, and I remember Solomon Sir had told this to me in the very beginning, that this won't necessarily be a skills building experience, but really a reflective process. And that has kind of carried me on even till today. I do a lot of reflective processing, and I think that as a social worker, that is so important to the work that we do and to the populations that we serve. And so that helped me tremendously. I think just being able to, during my field placement, really understand and talk openly about my privilege as an American, coming into, an unknown territory, an unknown community to me, and my role in that. And sometimes, and often this is not how most of us think, but often the best thing to do is to just be in the backseat and to just witness and listen and observe and to not necessarily step in. And so that's a lot of what I was doing while I was at MCC. And it was invaluable. As I said in the beginning, I carry so many of those lessons with me today in my work. I would say it helped me grow in terms of my empathy. I'm able to relate to my clients and my coworkers a lot more. And I've learned that, I don't always need to have an answer right away, and that it's okay to sit back, reflect, think on it, and then to come forward with a solution. So those would be my main reflections. Adaptability wise, I would say the weather was for sure the biggest change for me. It is not nearly as hot where I am from in the US compared to Chennai. And so that was a huge shift for me, and, you know, needing to really take care of my body for those 3 months, making sure that I was drinking enough and eating the right foods, and just making sure that my health, was staying stable so that I could continue, attending and performing in my field placements. It was really interesting, again, to kind of be the observer in this experience, especially when it came to problem solving. I think Americans have a tendency to want to do very quickly and not really think on things, just to have a solution in a couple minutes. And often these solutions are not well thought out. They are just a solution, but not the best one. And so I think problem solving, you know, looked very different in my role as a international student at MCC, but I found it very interesting to see how my team, particularly what we called ourselves Team TK, but in the field action program, to see how they problem solved, and to see, you know, which areas maybe I could contribute to and which areas I should take a step back in and let them do their thing. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I had to share. It was an amazing experience. Solomon Sir was just wonderful. To this day, I think one of the best supervisors that I have had. I felt very open with him, and I felt that we shared this really meaningful connection, and what a beautiful thing to be able to experience that with your supervisor, especially as you are abroad and so many things are so different. But I felt that our connection grew even stronger, you know, during my entire placement there. So anyway, Solomon Sir has my contact information, so I'd be happy to be in touch with anyone who is interested to learn more. And thank you so much for including me in your panel.
Thank you so much to Marina Sterngold from the University of Michigan, who was an exchange student to Madras Christian College. And listening to her recorded session, we know how important the reflective learning process is in social work, and very especially in international social work, when we're talking of interdependency, when we're talking about all these global concerns that are there. I think this is one definite skill that we all require, that we really have to build, and that came out very powerfully in her presentation. And the second thing was adaptability. And I think in the context that we are in, with the global crisis that is there around us, as social workers, adaptability is a very, very important skill that we have to develop and use extensively, because we are called to function in more ways than one. You know, it is not in one way as we think it is going to be. And we have seen it with the crisis that we are in right now. Even the social work educators, even before we started, we were talking about this, how we are called to adapt to different situations, even with fieldwork training now and going virtual, how adaptability is a very important skill. So thank you again, Marina, for your time. And we do hope that you'll keep in touch with us. And we really enjoyed having you with us on campus while you were here. The other two speakers are very, very special to us at Madras Christian College. We have with us Ms. Amita Punnos and Mr. Liris Thomas. Both of them were students of the Department of Social Work. Liris was senior and Amita followed after that. And both of them went to the University of South Australia in Adelaide as exchange students from MCC to the University of South Australia. Of course, they went 1 year after the other. Liris went first and then followed by Amita Punnos. Liris is a researcher and has worked largely on issues of faith that concern society, and involved with forming very intellectual and scholarly response to violence and hate across South and Southeast Asia. He has served and authored human rights reports since 2014, and currently he manages programs for an international anti-trafficking organization. He's based out of Delhi, and what is beautiful is that he's married to Amita, and together they have a 5-year-old beautiful daughter. Amita Punnos is a social worker too, with more than 10 years of experience in national and international developmental sector. Amita comes with extensive experience of working in partnership with multiple stakeholders, both government and non-governmental, rural and urban disadvantaged communities across India itself. Currently, she manages developmental programs for an international chamber of commerce based in Delhi. She says, I share my life with my best friend Liris, and together we parent a spirited 5-year-old daughter. So Liris and Amita, a very, very warm welcome to both of you. And we really look forward to listening to your experiences as international exchange students and how that has impacted your career in social work. Over to both of you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's an honor to be part of the department and back hearing you and hearing everybody else. Just wanted to start with what Mrs. Harrison had said about culture and identity. One of the things that the competencies that I kind of learned, apart from the fact that we got married post an international social work stint, which is a separate conversation altogether. One of the things that I really learned was the importance of context. That is not something that came out just because I studied social work. It came out from the fact that we were able to go across cultures, across identities. It is very important to have context because one can't change or one can't measure transformation without having context. It is as important as kind of defining the idea of freedom from and then to freedom to, because freedom from slavery makes a lot of sense. But what are they going into? So the freedom to was something that I really understood in terms of my exposure to international settings. It is also important that I say these two examples because I remember one of my classmates had also gone before me, and the context was very important because he was in a school and he suddenly raised the kid in his arms. He was about 5 years old, kid in his arms. He started playing with him, and then it was a really bad scene because in India you could do that, but in Australia you can't, and we didn't know that. And we had to go through a specific child abuse session after that. That context kind of set the whole tone for our visit, because for me it was more of a culture shock. But more than that, it is more about what you were looking into doing with the child. It was surprising for me. The other thing was in terms of vocational training that I saw. Mostly when we plan vocational trainings in India, we do it for the poor, we do it for the discriminated. But in Australia, vocational training matters to everybody, even to the poor person, but even to the middle class or upper class student who is planning to pay back their loans. And that was something that I couldn't imagine doing. And so the context was something that sets me up into learning what international social work is all about. And one of that competencies was very crucial into what I do today, what in terms of what reports come out. Because when you write reports, when you author human rights reports, you have to study the history. You have to study the scenario. You have to study the context. Because without that, your report can be skewed. Your report will not be neutral. And that is something that I have treasured the most. And that's the only thing I'm going to share. Amita would conclude what we'd like to share.
All right. Yeah, I think just I sort of echo with Liris that it's just amazing to always continue to have this relationship with MCC because it's very close to our heart. And I just want to say that as we did the internship there with UniSA, as I reflect back, it was in 2009, but as I reflect back, I think what comes to my mind is the fact that it was a very transformative experience. I say that because I think when you're sort of going from, studied social work in India, and then you go to Australia, and then you feel like, anything in Australia can't sort of, upset you because you have seen the worst of inequalities probably. And that was my framework. But I go in and I did my student placement in a school, in a class. I was a student, like a school social worker. And this class had 15 students. Of that, around the class had at least 10 nationalities represented in that one single class. And I suddenly realized that I was out of my depth. I realized that, wait, there's something that I'm not getting. Like I come in, I remember, I just heard a speaker talk about how you can't go in with one solution. And I had one solution in my head, and I went in and I realized I have no understanding of what I'm dealing with. And I didn't understand why a 7-year-old girl is acting up till I realized that she is being picked up every day. Every day she has to pack up her childhood to her father, and the next day she would have to unpack it and pack up a different childhood to her mother, and being sort of shuttled between both her parents. It's not a reality that I had seen. I couldn't understand why a 10-year-old African refugee child would sort of act up in the class, because I didn't understand that every time there was a noise, a really loud noise, that would upset him and remind him of the time that people would walk into their school with guns. People would walk into their families with guns, and there's also the fact that I never understood what it means to actually a child who's 5-year-old and gets shuttled between different foster homes. So this, I think, I'll just go back to also what Ms. Philomena said about a cultural understanding, a knowledge and sensitivity. I realized that one of the big competencies that I picked up in uni through this student exchange program was social empathy. I realized that it needed. I think even Ms. Philomena spoke about how it's not just being there, just having a good time with people. It needed an intentional relationship that needs to be created. That sort of social empathy, that sort of you have not experienced it, but you can still walk closer with people. You can improve your knowledge to understand the history, to understand sort of the socio-political context in which people live through. All of that to say that I was deeply blessed by this experience when I actually started working with, back in India, when I started working with minor girls who were trafficked and rescued from human trafficking, from brothels. And I realized that I can't just walk in and feel like I can be the savior. I really had to walk in with the understanding that I don't know, I don't have the knowledge, but I need to build an intentional relationship with her, with the person, see her as a person, understand her life, sort of share her life in many ways. Like, even though they would close you, because as you know, it's so hard, the victim shame, all of that's so hard. But to actually just go back every time with the intention that I want to know, I want to learn who you are, and what sort of your and to be sensitive to who that person is. So I count it a blessing that I got to do many barbecues with the African families that were in Australia. I counted quite a learning experience that we could do an outback travel in Australia with the families that we stayed with. They would take us to meet other families in Australia, the Aboriginal communities. Like, it was quite a lot of learning experience. And I think the placement, also the student exchange program, also gave us a love for traveling. We've been very glad to do travel, get to know communities. And I think I would just conclude by saying, and I want to conclude by saying this, because what I've seen, the second aspect I've seen very critical was mentoring. And I have Miriam ma'am here. I see Dr. Miriam and Dr. Solomon here. And I just want to say that the mentoring that we have received, and the mentoring that we received in Uni SA, like, I had a dedicated mentor who would just help me, because I would go on and on rant about I told her that I am not useful in a multicultural situation, because I really am not able to connect with the kids. But she would help me, because mentoring was so important. Like, she would help me to see above the little limited thoughts, and she would help me to get a different perspective and a framework, and also help me to then articulate it within the framework of a very evidence-based approach. And these are what I think has been a really amazing time for us and a great learning for us. So big thank you to both of you and the department.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liris and Amita, for taking time off and sharing your experiences with us. And I think the importance of the cultural context, transformative experience, and the whole role of mentoring in international social work in terms of understanding cross-cultural competencies and our role in an international setting is so important. And that has come out very strongly in both your presentations. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. And it's such a joy to see you both. Very happy to see you both. The last on the panel is Mr. Daniel Ishaku. Ishaku just completed his Master's in Social Work from Madras Christian College in April 2020. And he's an international student at Madras Christian College. He is going to share about his experience in India in terms of his skill development and how he has looked at building competencies and skills in India from a Nigerian perspective. Ishaku finished recently, but he has been involved as president of the Federation for International Students Association in Chennai and the social media strategist at Rakshak NGO and support staff with Center for Peace, Advocacy and Sustainable Development in Africa. He's had a wide range of experience during his field placement at Madras Christian College itself. Over to Mr. Ishaku for his sharing.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Ishaku. I'm from Nigeria and I'm so glad to be a part of this webinar today. I should start by appreciating the head of the department, aided Madras Christian College, all the faculty members, and as well as the current students of the Department of Social Work, Madras Christian College, for all their efforts in ensuring that this webinar is conducted successfully today, and also for the opportunity that you've given to me to share a few thoughts with all of us here. Myself, as mentioned, I'm an alumni of the Social Work Department aided Madras Christian College, and during my study I specialized in medical and psychiatry. And it is such a joy to connect with all of us here via this platform online today. I was asked to talk about building competence and skills in India, a Nigerian perspective. And I should start by saying that my experiences, my interactions in India as an international student have really shaped my life and they've impacted me beyond measure. Being in India now for over 6 years, I feel like I've learned so much and all the experiences I've gathered have made me the person that I am today. If I think about when I first arrived India, I had so many beautiful experiences, and one of such was when I walked into my classroom for the first time, and I was asked to sit down and welcomed into the class warmly. And when I sat down, I realized that I was sitting at the girls' side of the class, and I never knew that there was a norm, where boys will sit down on one side and then girls will sit down on one side. And this was during my undergraduate studies. But as time went on, I realized that there were a lot of things that I had preconceived notions about that were actually wrong. Only a few of them were quite true. Before I came to India, I remember that I did a lot of research, just to understand India more, to know how I'll be treated, to understand how the behavior of the people here are, what were the norms, what were accepted gestures, and so on and so forth. But to my surprise, when I came here, everything was quite different. And I think some of the challenges that I had was the fact that the academic structure was completely different from back at home. The teaching methods were different. And interestingly for me was the fact that the relationship between students and faculty members were quite cordial, they were friendly, which was quite unusual everywhere from the country which I come from. And these experiences were quite new to me as a young person and as a young student who had a lot of preconceived notions about this country. And so the academic structure was one challenge, the teaching methods, but I think even more challenging for me was the language. The language was a big challenge for me as an international student. And as time went on, I realized that actually the challenge was not the language or the institution or the people or the norms, but it was the fact that I did not have, this knowledge of this language or the knowledge of how the norms are here. And so I think the biggest discovery for me as an international student was the fact that I am the one who is foreign. And I think having that attitude for me as an individual helped me to begin to take life more from the student point of view. And so even though I'm a foreigner here in India, my attitude was, of course, I am the foreigner, so I am the student, both to life and both to my classroom, as well. And this attitude helped me to scale through the different hurdles and the difficulties that I encountered during the course of my study and my stay here as an international student in India. I think the bridge of all of this for me as an individual was that I had to self-audit myself. I had to introspect. I had to come to a realization that I had biases that were not right, were quite different from the reality on ground, and that my values were different, that I had attitudes, I had behaviors that was very different from the country where I am right now. And so the process of learning all the new norms, learning the language, and learning about the culture, I think that process was really key in helping me adapt better here as an international student. And that's how I've been able to grow and adapt here in India. I became more open to a lot of cultural gestures as I began to interact with people more often. You know, I had to intentionally get closer to a lot of my Indian colleagues, and I had to begin to ask questions, begin to read more, begin to travel out, begin to do a lot of more things, attend events. And I feel like all of these interactions really helped me to gain a wider perspective, a broader view of this country, and that helped me become more effective in my communication, more effective in understanding what the behavioral practices are and what they could mean in this place. This led me to start an organization here in India called the Federation of International Students Association. And we thought it would be nice to have such a body who would bring international students together and help them understand about the people of this land, of this nation, the culture, and also to learn from one another, because we all come from different places. And I think for over 3 years now, from 2017, which we started FISA, to right now, it has been an amazing experience for me. And right now, even after completing my master's course at the Department of Social Work, Madras Christian College, I have been freelancing with a couple of NGOs, both at home and here in India. And I've noticed and realized that because of these experiences that I had, interacting with people, intentionally going out there, putting myself in the place of a student and learning from them, you know, it has really helped me to become more effective. My values have been refined. I've built skills of communication. I've built professional skills as a social worker. The knowledge that I've gained as a student in class and outside class have actually helped me put a lot of the things that I do right now into the right perspective. And I believe that these are the kinds of things that every one of us ought to desire to have, you know, to have an experience that would help us become better people and help us become better social work students. And since better people through this freelancing work that I have been doing, I've been able to really learn a lot as well. But beyond learning a lot, I think the things that I've learned over 6 years of being in India have really been showing in the way that I communicate with people, in the way that I work, my working ethics, the value that I have for people, and the way that I interact with them, my ability to empathize with people and situations. And I feel like that has really been impactful, positively in my life. And thank you so much once again for this opportunity to share this with all of you. God bless.
Thank you, Ishaku. Thank you very much, Ishaku, for that pre-recorded reflection that you sent to us. And I think something that has come out very strongly in all these reflections that we got from them was the kind of importance in terms of reflective learning and openness to learning. And I think Ishaku also brought in the dimension of gender and understanding gender in international context. And we also know that in disasters, in all the global issues that we see around us, whether it is with refugees or with displacement or climate change, we know that gender is one major concern that we have to mainstream into international social work. So thank you, Ishaku, for reminding us about the importance of mainstreaming gender into cross-cultural competencies and in international social work. So thank you to all the panel members. We have questions that are coming on chat and on the YouTube. The organizers will send the questions to you. Please answer it so that we can post it back to the participants. Thank you very much. And over to you, Roja, for the next session.
Thank you, ma'am. That was an interesting panel discussion, ma'am. We have got a lot of different perspective. Thank you, ma'am. And we are now moving to the last phase of the webinar, that is a valedictory function. Now I would like to call Dr. Miriam Samuel to introduce Dr. Anna Maria Campanini, President, International Association of Schools of Social Work, for the valedictory address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Roja, and thank you, Dr. Anna Maria, for so patiently being with us from 3 o'clock in the evening. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us in this webinar, and I think it's such a great motivation for all of us. It indeed is a great honor and privilege for us to have you here as president of the International Association of Schools of Social Work to participate in this webinar. Ma'am, you definitely add value to this webinar, and we're so very happy that you're here with us. Dr. Anna Maria Campanini currently serves as president of IASSW. She is also a professor of social work at the Milano Bicocca University, a trained social worker. I hope I got that right, doctor. Thank you. I've been practicing that pronunciation for some time. She's a trained social worker, a family therapist. I was so happy to see that you're a family therapist too. She's held various leadership positions in Europe and has taught extensively in social work education and authored numerous publications. I just want to read one small line of hers from the vision statement of March 2019, which she has written as the president of IASSW. And she says that it's my vision that we become strong international organization where language and cultural barriers are overcome, so that we can work together to develop programs that prepare future leaders who are dedicated to the realization of the mission of social work. And I think, ma'am, that's why you're here with us this evening, not on my invitation or the invitation of the president of my university, but on the invitation of our young students. Wow. Thank you so much. It's a great motivation to us, and we look forward to listening to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I have been really happy to participate and stay all the time today, and only for few times yesterday because I had a lot of commitment during this period and everything is online, is going on. But I found very interesting this session, and especially not because the professor were not interesting, but because I know better them, and the students' perspective has been really, really amazing. So I will try to say something that in a way take in consideration what has been said during these 2 days, but trying to organize these ideas around a perspective that comes from my role as a president of the Association of the Schools of Social Work. So I want to start with the consideration that social work, both as a profession and the discipline, is really closely related to the historical, cultural, political, and socioeconomic characteristic. And we have listed this, and therefore is also in constant change. So in order to respond to the needs and providing a preparation that is consistent with the challenges of contemporary society, it is also necessary to analyze the current scenario. And we know that this scenario is characterized by globalization with its different phenomena. But if we go back to our origin, we can say, I would like to underline attended by more than 2,000 people at that time. It's incredible. No, and in this context, the three international organization has been established. But also, I would like to quote the vision of Alice Salomon, who has been the first president of International Association, but also the leader and initiator of the German social work. And she anticipated 100 years before almost the phenomenon that today we call globalization. His prophetic words that social injustice are the consequence of an unjust economic system that operates at international level, therefore requires a global commitment. And these words are incredibly true also today. So I think that one of the first aspects that is necessary to consider from the definition of social work as a practice and as an academic discipline that has been approved, as you have heard yesterday, in 2014, is a construction of curricula that take into account the international dimension of social work. So it's necessary, as well as also Vimla said today, to help the students to develop a critical understanding of the factors behind the processes of globalization, the interdependence of nations, the same problems that are present in different countries, the chain effects that occur at the level of society from any action that takes place in no matter what countries, are all very important aspects to be considered, although the social work is engaged in local context. So is it necessary to study and understand with this look the new scenarios that are presented in different fields. For example, the demographic field, which highlights some very relevant changes, such as the aging of the population with very old people, sometimes in situation of physical and psychosocial dependence with chronic disease or Alzheimer's situation. The migratory phenomenon that affects in different forms all the countries. The increased family instability with more divorce and separation, and consequently more single parents households, just to name some few of these phenomena. But also the field of the social and economic policy, where in recent decades, the new regulatory framework of the labor market is marked by the difficulties to create employment and the consolidation of neoliberal policies that that are accompanied by a phenomenon of the regulation have led to the consolidation of an axis of division between stable and precarious workers, including new forms of poverty, what we call the working poor, for example. And this pandemic has made an incredible, terrible effect also on this sense. The various reforms carried out in different sectors of the public policy, such as health, education, social services, pension, and even the management of unemployment benefits and services, have also meant a mercantilization of social rights, which I think is a problem that we have to address with a lot of intelligence. And also it's important to help students become aware of being part of an international community. So I appreciate a lot this initiative. And I also try to, as an association of schools, to create a space in our association for the students. So I ask to be in contact with our colleague who is working on that. Until now, this has not been possible, is not being realized, but I think this can be a challenge for our future. So helping the students to participate to common initiative, to share information and experience, innovation and problem solving strategies. I think that they are they are the new generation. I am an old lady. I am 70 years old now, and so the ability, the capacity they have to use also this kind of new technology, new media, I think it can really be helpful in organizing an international movement of the students. And I also think that this experience, for me, if it will be possible, it should be mandatory to have one period abroad for social workers, because to feel, to be foreign, to try and question our own belief system, I think that this is an exercise, as we have heard by the students, that help to develop a broader vision of phenomena and the intercultural attitude. And is very, very important in today's society. So there is also some other problems now, because the emphasis on the international dimension poses some challenges that are articulated in possible tension between the need for a global vision and the development of local practices, between processes of diffusion and generalization that very frequently elaborated the theories of experts from the Western and theories that are based on indigenous culture. This is something that has to be solved. I read also some question about how can we translate, how can we make available for everyone, no, some thought that are born in a context in which the language is not well known. Is India, but is also Italy. We are also one language that is not used in the world. So there is this tension, and I am really working also with the French and the Spanish area of a culture that can be more present in our discussion, but also some values. Now we know that the Christian Jewish tradition has been at the beginning of our values, and sometimes these values are not fitting so well with the other culture. So all the process of indigenization, decolonization is very important today. And I think that there is another aspect that we have to underline, no? Is the problem between how to practice what we affirm as a value, like social justice, like human rights, in our daily activities. Because of course, when we teach, everyone agree about this concept. But when we have to translate into practice, this is much more difficult. So I think that we have to develop perspective models, theories, and practice that are really effective in combating structural injustice, in affirming the socioeconomic rights of the people, in contributing to construction of social policies that will be consistent with this principle. So the good balance between, for example, micro practice and macro practice, individual support and structural change should be in the focus. I have a systemic background as a family therapist, a systemic approach. And so for me, there is no alternative between one and the other, but we have to cope both of them. because otherwise we leave one part of our engagement, which is very important. So I would like to also to underline one aspect that is the importance as a professional expert that we are to consider the people as also expert of experience, not only as a person that have the right to receive something, but as a partner in our situation. And also, I would like to quote Edgar Morin, which is a leading French sociologist, now 90-year-old, but still very, very clear in the mind, that points out that it's time to consider ecology not only with an environmental and technological view, but as a systemic vision of the world that must influence all levels, individual, collective, and political. So the consideration of this complex interdependence between human beings and natural world is essential to build what he called a new civilization based on a changing of the way of thinking and acting in society and in our personal life. And Morin suggests focusing on social economy, rejecting a profit-driven economy to develop this new civilization founded on coexistence, on the recognition of others, and not on the pure logic of success and managerial efficiency. Activate a process of rehumanization and promote the value of the person against the emphasis on status symbols and consumerism. All these fields, I think, are our area of intervention, and are really we can have a good training that can decline theoretical models and perspective in methodology and specific tool to reach this result. And of course, the green social work that was also quoted by Vimla, written by Lena Dominelli, is something that has to become a part of our training, because natural catastrophes happen every day in the world. So this impels us as educators to provide a formation that is more attentive to integrate the environmental aspect with the human dimension. So also this includes to have some interdisciplinary alliance and try to find new models for socioeconomic development at macro level. I want to finish my speech. I hope that I stay in the time. And social workers and educators of social work, we must build a political agenda that is based on human rights and the more holistic model. We have now, how do you say, spread now the new global agenda. And the topic is co-building. So we have to build together this future for our world and for our life. And I think that this engagement, also through the words, the indigenous word of Ubuntu, I think is very important, because can really, once again, I go back to our big mother, no? What Jane Addams said, I can be safe if my community is safe. I can be well if my community is well. And Ubuntu means really the same things. So thank you so much for inviting, and congratulations also for your students that have really given an interesting perspective to this meeting. And thank you for you as educators that have been able to empower your students in this way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna Maria. It was really encouraging to have you on board with us. And you so beautifully concluded all the presentations over the last 2 days, and for reminding us that, we have to be interdependent, we have to be co-building together, as educators and as practitioners for the next generation that is going to follow. And we are so happy that at Madras Christian College, we're so deeply rooted in values of justice and rights and empowerment for our young people to prepare social workers to work at the grassroots level. Very especially at a time when India, the social work in India is at a crossroads with so much of focus on human resource management, that we at the department strive to be deeply rooted in the core values of social work.
Very
Thank
good.
you so much for encouraging us. We hope to be in touch with you and to be more connected with you and IASSW.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Over to the organizers. Yeah, thank you.
So growing global interdependence and international social work is a conference that we conceived it from the Department of Social Work, Madras Christian College. In Department of Social Work, Madras Christian College, we offer a paper or a course in international social work as an elective. So this year, we have 12 students who have taken it as an elective for international social work. So this webinar is actually organized by these 12 students as part of their training and to connecting and to learning. In this pandemic, I think this also thrown a wide opportunity for us to connect this way. As Dr. Anna Maria was stating and remembering the first president of IASSW, then I was immediately taken back to my book. I just quickly grabbed my book now, and I wanted to read a quote that was said in 1928 during the conference, the first international conference of IASSW. 42 countries, 2,481 delegates were present in Paris. And this is the quote. It says, it didn't say who said that, but Eglaton Jeb has actually mentioned it in the book. In the last 100 years, this is in 1928, okay? In the last 100 years, the technical application of human intervention has wrought nothing short of a revolution in international relations. The high seas obstacles for so long to free interchange of goods and ideas have become a great medium for the exchange of both. Ships, railways, aeroplanes, telephones, wireless telegraphy, broadcasting, all these have made the world smaller, have brought us into close contact with one another for better or for worse. And I think almost, as Dr. Anna Maria said, almost 100 years afterwards, I think the world is shrinking even more faster. I think we are much more closer. And thanks to pandemic, that made us even more closer. Otherwise, we would not have thought about this. And I am grateful to God and to the department and the collaborators and all the speakers who could come at such short notice. We started off with Dr. Julie Jolett from University of Calgary, setting the note and the scope of international social work. And then we moved on to Global Interdependence by Dr. Jude and Dr. Odis from Dr. Jude from Regis College and Dr. Odis from the University of Michigan. And then we went on to talk about global social work education. I think University of Michigan is far ahead than many of the universities. I think Dr. Katie Lopez was talking about the global social work pathway. I think that was something very interesting that we can learn from each other. And today, again, we started off with Dr. Vimla Nadkarni, who can talk about the future of international social work. And then Dr. Robin from University of Houston, talking about the mental health and interdependence. And Dr. Philomena, I think, emphatically talked about cross-cultural competence and the importance of it. And I think never to forget, I think that the panelists, the different student group who were students and now in the profession, I think as panelists, they threw a lot of light for us to reflect as educators, as students, the opportunities and the hope and faith that we have towards the future. Now, before I just conclude, I think, I don't know, we call it in India, it's telepathy, where if you want to say something and somebody has already told it, we call it telepathy. So I think Dr. Anna Maria has that, I think very vibrantly she said about, connecting the students. I think it's time I remember I have attended 2 or 3 international the biennial conferences in Hong Kong and Korea and few other places. I think we need time and space to be given to students even during this conference. I think it's not just educators and practitioners. It's time that the main stakeholders are involved in our planning, in our discussions. I think that's number 1 in agenda. Number 2, I think quickly a way forward. I'm sure IISSW can connect us all the members of the schools of social work and the individual members and practitioners. And I'm sure we can connect the students together for a webinar. I think that's not going to cost us much. And I'm sure we are freely so available. And I'm sure we can put up a platform from IISSW. We'll be much grateful and thankful. The third part of it, I'm picking up from what Dr. Anna Maria suggested, that at least one course, at least one credit paper is offered across the globe, and I'm sure that will be a fantastic idea. In fact, international social work as an MSW can also be a great thought. I think we've been thinking about it in the department for the last 13 years. We could not materialize it. If anybody here from different places, if you're interested, I'm sure that we are ready to pick it up from where we are. And I think students going and taking a credit paper from different universities abroad, I'm sure it is very possible. I think thanks to this pandemic, which has made it possible that online classes are possible, connecting people, I think code transforming, I think that is a word, that's one of the words that's picked up from the global agenda. I'm sure Ubuntu will take place. I am because we are. Over to the organizers. Rishi, can you come over and say the word of thanks? Rishi Dadal.
Good evening all. On behalf of Department of Social Work Aided, Madras Christian College, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this international webinar on growing global interdependence in international social work. At the outset, I thank all the speakers who have been contributed in this webinar. We have been enriched by your knowledge. We are grateful to Dr. Anna Maria Campanini, President, International Association of Schools of Social Work, IASSW, for her presence and support. Our heartfelt thanks to our participants for all your active participation, without whom the webinar wouldn't have been a success. An event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling weeks ago. It requires planning and a bird's eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by Dr. Prince Solomon. Thank you, sir. We also thank our head of our department and other staffs for their enthusiastic support. A special thanks to everyone in the organizing committee for the involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks behind their comfort zones. With these warm words, we move to the end of today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishi. I want to thank all the participants for joining us on Zoom and YouTube, and the guests for sharing their valuable insight on such relevant topic. The feedback form will be shared in the chat box of both Zoom and YouTube. Kindly note that you receive the certificate from us only. The feedback form will be provided for the participant, those who attended the webinar on both days. And the announcement. Tomorrow's our webinar holding a national webinar titled the Consultation on the National Council of Social Work, Education and Practice Bill. The expectation promise in collaboration with the AIMS Medical Social Work Service Offer Association, New Delhi. The registration link will be shared in the chat box now. We invite you to join us and we discuss the bill which will be shape the future of social work practitioners and students of India. Thank you. And stay tuned to our Telegram and Instagram pages for further updates. Thank you and have a good day. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Anna Maria, for being with us. Such a privilege, and we hope to be connected. Yes, we will be in touch. We will be in touch, definitely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, do let us know. Yes, if there's anything. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Philomena, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for asking me.
No,
be in touch again soon.
Yeah, it was lovely to see you over virtually, but it was great to be connected.
Thank you, and Prince
you.
as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and regards to all your faculty members
I will do, and I will talk about our students connecting soon.
Yes,
yes.
Thank you. Thank
I'll
you
be
so
in touch.
much.
I think I have both your emails somewhere.
Yes, definitely. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Bye. Prince, thank you for all your effort, and all the students. Great work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, all the lective Rishi, very good vote of thanks. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Beulah and Renu and Sheba are the one who.
Yeah, I know. Beulah has been after me. She didn't let me sleep at all, Beulah.
Thank you, ma'am, but you did it very well.
Thank you, Beulah. All of you, very great work. All the elective students, excellent. I'm really happy that you could put this together, and it is definitely a very good global platform for the department, and it will definitely increase the perspectives of the department on the national and international level. But do be in touch with them, with IASSW, and find out how you can be involved. Now that you are in direct contact with her, and she has said that they're looking for a student page on IASSW, I think you can be in direct touch with them and keep sending her information about all our programs, so that she knows what we are doing. So that will be good. Yeah, Prince, I think also any research opportunities, you should be in touch with them. ISSW has a lot of announcements that we can think of. And I think the 22, the next conferences? Yeah, so I think announcement is going to come up soon, I think. So we should also see how things are going. Okay, thank you all. First years, I know you have a test tomorrow, but a lot of you have come online to listen to the lectures. So you can log off and study for my test tomorrow. Dora, I see you here. Thank you for joining us, Dora. It was nice to see you on board yesterday and today. Good. And I was looking at the YouTube, we have had participants from Portugal, from Kashmir, from some of the African countries. It's been really good. Excellent. So you should write a good report now that can be sent to the...
Roja is in charge of the reporting.
Okay. Please write it, get it vetted by Prince Sir, and we need a report. Send it also to Sudarshan so that we can be sent to the college. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
Anyway, we have one more webinar tomorrow. We are still not done for the week.
Yeah. It's a webinar week.
Live on YouTube. Okay. Anyway, I haven't said anything. Okay, yeah, we do hope all of you will join us tomorrow. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.